Natasha, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Nigel Fletcher joins us, a political historian. He's the co-founder and research director of the Centre for Opposition Studies, which is based at the University of Bolton, now at King's College, I think, as well. Nigel, I want to place this in some sort of historical context because defections are always important on the day that they happen, but rarely have any long-term effect. Just tell us of any defections that you can think of that have had a long-term effect and whether you think this might.
Yes, well, I think you're right in saying that this is usually a sort of one-day wonder. But for all the reasons that you've just set out, I think this one could be more significant because it is so unlikely. I'm just trying to sort of go back into some of the previous defections that we've seen over the years. And going from the Conservative Party to the Labour Party is unusual in itself. That's the first thing to say. It's far more usual for Conservatives, if they are going to defect either to, as you said, Reform UK. We've had a number in the past going to UKIP. Or some of them have gone to the Liberal Democrats. But going from the Conservatives to the Labour Party is in itself unusual. But those who've done it, I think, particularly of, if you remember, Quentin Davies, who did so under David Cameron's leadership, he did that, but then he was perhaps more of a centrist, moderate Conservative to start with. It is unusual, as you say, that Natalie Elphicke, someone who is on the sort of right of the Conservative Party, going to the Labour Party, is in itself unusual. And so for that reason, I think this is going to cause the kind of waves that you're picking up and reporting this evening. I think that they do become important when they speak to a wider story, and that's what we're seeing here. The Conservative Party under John Major, leading up to 1997, suffered a range of defections. There was Emma Nicholson who defected. There were various others who sort of lost the whip and stood down. I think George Gardner joined the Referendum Party, for example. It's those kind of things that sort of speak to the sort of deterioration of a government. And that's what I think Keir Starmer is banking on. The fact that this is just another sort of nail in the coffin of the Conservative Party, and coming, as you said, just a week after Dan Poulter, another defection straight for the Conservatives to Labour. It starts to develop a narrative. But I think this is a problem for him because when you've got Labour MPs very seriously raising objections to this, not being consulted on it, obviously, because it's something that's been done very much behind closed doors. I'm not sure whether this is going to be a one-day wonder as they normally are. I think this is something which may have repercussions for the Labour leadership. And given that we're told that they are in conversations perhaps with other Conservatives, it might perhaps give them pause for thought about which Conservatives those are.
Couple of texts here, one from Stephen Newcastle. Didn't Oswald Mosley defect to Labour from the Conservatives? Well, that is going back a bit, and I certainly wouldn't compare Natalie Elphicke with him. Other people are mentioning Winston Churchill, who not only defected, but he redefected as well. It didn't harm his career in the long term, did it?
No, and of course, famously, he came out with the phrase, say, it takes quite someone to re-rat, after you've ratted on your party. So, yes, there have been many in the past, but I think, you can go back into, you and I have both written on sort of 19th century politics and on sort of, the various kind of shenanigans that went on in parties back into history when parties were more fluid. Generally speaking, this happens when a party splits over a particular issue. There's an issue of great contention that people divide on. We saw that with those MPs who went to UKIP, for example. That was very clear. That was on the issue of Europe and other things like that. There does seem in these cases, when you reach the end of a government where people defect, as you say, it doesn't seem that there is very much principle at stake, other than their desire in some cases to hold on to their seat. Some people, Sean Woodward, for example, when he defected from the Conservatives under William Hague, was rewarded with a safe seat and later showed up in a Labour cabinet. Others Quentin Davies I mentioned, and you've mentioned earlier on your suspicions that they end up in the House of Lords. And indeed, Peter Mandelson was talking about this only a couple of weeks ago on an interview that he did on a podcast, where he said that this is what happened all the time. It was quite clear what was going on, that they would come along and say that they were thinking of defecting, but they'd quite like a peerage, and the Labour Party would say, yes, well, that's going to be great for us, so we're happy to give that. He was quite open about it, quite controversially, that was what the deal was. It remains to be seen whether that's the case here, but that certainly is usually the transaction that people suspect. I think that because this is getting so much attention, and because there have been so many other cases like that, it may be something that not only rebounds on the Labour leadership from their own members, but also from a public point of view. It might also be something that turns voters off if they see it being quite that transactional.
Nigel, thank you very much indeed. Let's give a plug for Nigel's new book as well, The Not Quite Prime Ministers. It's a book of essays by him on all of the leaders of the opposition that failed to become Prime Minister. It sounds quite dry, but it's actually really, really interesting. So take a look at that. We'll come to your calls in a moment.